I'm Ayelet Waldman.
I'm Paul Waldman.
This is Boundary Issues.
Our mother, for many years, had on her bulletin board an 8x10 photo of you, Ayelet, smiling and shaking hands with one Joseph Robinette Biden.
Yes, I know. I have that photo too. Let me tell you about that call and then about what happened there. And then we can bemoan his just deterioration. So this was at an Obama event. I was a big fundraiser for Obama. I was at the fundraiser and I was really distracted because mom had just had a fall. She had fallen. It was when she had fallen down the stairs, and I was running the event in part. I was one of the organizers, and I ended up raising a ton of money for Obama. I mean, back when over $1 million was a lot. Now it's peanuts, but back then it was a lot. So I was a little bit distracted, and for some reason, I cannot explain why, when I was introduced in the sort of photo line to Biden, I said to him, yeah, my mom just had a fall and I'm really sorry. I'm just sort of focused on that. She's in the hospital. And he said, give me your phone, call your mother. And I was like, what? And he said, no, call your mother. So I called my mom and he said, what's her name? I said, Ricky. And he said, Ricky, this is Joe Biden. I hear you had a fall. How are you doing? And he talked to her for like, I don't know, 5 minutes. It felt like forever, but like 5 minutes is a long time when you're at a fundraiser and there are, 250 people standing around. And he had this kind of like genuine or artificial genuine, it felt genuine, like concern for her and empathy. And it was really very moving. And I kind of rode that. I actually do feel like the guy has a genuine capacity. He actually is an empathetic person. I mean, we saw that with after the Hamas attack. He really was present for the American families of victims of that attack in a way that, certainly Netanyahu, that fuckhead, wasn't. And certainly not he hasn't been present for American families of Gazan victims, let's be clear. But I mean, I think he was a really decent person, but I don't know, is it the narcissism of power? What has made him? He said he wasn't going to fucking run. Why did he run again?
I think a lot of people have stories like that one, actually. But part of the issue is ego, I think, that, he feels like nobody can save the country but him. And he beat Trump once and he'll do it again. And people always count him out. And then he comes back and he wins. And he does feel this sense of mission.
No, but like,
sure,
he doesn't win. He won once, right? He lost every primary he was in. That's why he was vice president, not, president before, from the time he was 35 on.
Yeah. And I think that over the years, I've gone through some ups and downs in my feelings about him. I mean, back in the day, during his last run in 2016, 2008, before he became vice president, I had a pretty low opinion of him. I had a pretty low opinion of him at the start of the 2020 campaign, when he was the more kind of posed as the more moderate of the candidates there, like all over intellectualized coastal elitists. I liked Elizabeth Warren. But it turned out that the Democratic electorate said that what they thought was needed to beat Donald Trump was somebody who kind of coded as moderate and would be palatable to the normie voter in the middle. And they were right about that. And then it turned out that he was, I think, has been a better president than I thought he would be on a lot of issues. Now, it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but there are some things where he's been better than expected. His record on judges is just extraordinary. It's
I know, and let's compare him to Obama, whose record on judges was abysmal. I mean, I really lay a lot of the judiciary. What happened to the judiciary is Obama's fault. he let himself be manipulated by the Senate, by this bogus, I knew people who were vetting judges, and his vetting process was just fucking ludicrous. And it's his fault. It's his fault that the judiciary is such a calamity. He didn't I mean, it's even his fault that Trump got 3 appointees. Excuse me.
But anyway, Biden has appointed more women, more non-white people. He's appointed a greater variety of people when it comes to their experience, public defenders. His record on judges is fantastic. There's also things like climate, where he has been the far and away the most effective and consequential president on climate change in history, not even close. So there are things like that where you can say, actually, this has been a really effective presidency. And I think that he probably thinks that too, that a lot of people didn't think that he was going to be very good. And he got some legislative victories that people weren't really expecting. He got an infrastructure bill passed. He got a gun control bill passed, even though it doesn't do all that much, but it's something. And so he looks at his own record, and I'm sure he's proud of it. And then, I think everybody who has had an aging parent knows that they go through this period where they're not really honest with themselves about their
Right.
state. And I have to say, I feel like I have been in a kind of denial. I haven't been like a big booster on this issue, but my feeling for a long time now has been, okay, he looks old. He has this kind of shuffling gait. He's got arthritis in his knees, and his voice has gotten very kind of quiet and raspy. So all that makes him appear very old, but we don't really have any genuine evidence that his decision making has been affected or anything like that. So he seems to be doing the job fine. And the media is kind of overblowing this and relying, they'll do all these like front page stories that it turns out rely on 2 anonymous sources. And so it's a much less of a big deal than it's often made out to be. That was my position for a long time. And since the debate happened, and now I'm looking back, I kind of feel like maybe I was not being completely honest. And we've all had this experience. Every Democrat has had this experience where you watched a Joe Biden press conference kind of on the edge of your seat, thinking, oh my God, please don't screw up. Please don't screw up. Please don't get confused. Please don't, mix up names. And you're sitting there like, with your knuckles turning white. And sometimes it's fine. And sometimes it isn't. And
Right.
that's
But
the
just
way
the very
that
fact
people
that you're
have been.
sitting there, like if you actually confronted that, if you said to yourself, why am I so freaking scared? Maybe I should interrogate this a little bit. And I'm scared because I know he could fuck up and it has happened and we should have gotten rid of him. We should have taken away the keys 2 years ago. And his family is just facilitating it in the most, I mean, again, just like you're saying, I feel like I see it, like his wife she's like the spouse of, I don't think he has dementia. I really don't. I think he's just,
No, I don't
senescence.
think so.
She's like the wife of someone with Alzheimer's, like, doing gymnastics to make sure that nobody, and not even just that nobody knows that, but that he, God forbid, won't feel the tiniest bit bad about his ebbing capacities. Like, and his whole team, first of all, how delusional are they that they put him on television in a debate? Like, that makes me think they're just kidding themselves, right?
It could be. And, here's the thing about a person like Joe Biden. He's somebody who was in the Senate for 35 years. And when you've been around that long, by the time you get to be president, you have around you an inner circle who have been with you your whole career and whose own careers are devoted to your greater glory. They are Biden people. So it's going to be really, really difficult for them to kind of turn around and say that this is over and you need to really consider stepping aside, because their whole identity is caught up with the idea that this person is someone that they're devoted to, that they're loyal to, that they believe in. And it's much easier for somebody who, came to work for him a year ago to maybe look at it in a more dispassionate way. But for those people who are closest to him, those are going to be the people who are the most loyal. We've seen some reports now, and again, it's sometimes hard when you read these news stories and you see an anonymous source to know, is that somebody who's really close to him? Is it somebody who, works in the White House, but, talked to him for 5 minutes 6 months ago? It can be hard to tell when the sources are anonymous. But there has been some reporting that people in the family or other people close to him are saying it's the staff's fault and it's the people who prepared him for the debate's fault. Well, maybe they didn't do a great job in the debate prep, but ultimately, it's not Ron Klain or Bob Bauer who are out there on that stage and can't put two sentences together.
Yeah, it's not about prep. It has nothing to do with prep. I mean, like I have my own feelings about the Biden family. There was at Grant Park in 2008 when Obama was elected, because I was like a big fundraiser and because whatever I knew him from law school, we were invited to the sort of inner circle tent, the National Finance Committee tent. And so what we ended up doing is we stood very close to where he was giving his speech, like right underneath it. And we stood with the Biden family and a group of nastier, entitled, obnoxious people I have never come across. Now, here we are making history, the first Black president of the United States. The entire audience is crying and they are complaining about why they're standing with random people. Please just be in the moment, enjoy this instead of like bitterly, bitching about your line of sight, which can I just tell you was incredible. We were like 4 people back in this massive crowds of tens of thousands. And we were so close that Rosie Shaban was in every shot because she was on Michael's shoulders. And at the time she had this like cascading blonde hair, and she was, I don't know, she was born in 2001, so she was 7 years old. And the sight, the sort of camera shot of a little girl with blonde hair cheering for Barack Obama, so the cameras were behind us, was like, catnip for the world. So I was getting texts from people literally all over the world saying, oh my God, that's Rosie on camera. That's how close we were. And they were such a bunch of misbegotten kvetches. So I'm not surprised that they're blaming his staff. They should blame themselves because they didn't take away the fucking keys and tell him an 86-year-old man should not be president. We learned this with Ronald Reagan. You cannot run. You said you wouldn't run. Don't be a hypocrite. Don't run.
So you're saying you have your own petty grievances against
Yes,
the Biden
I have
family.
petty grievances. No, my grievance gives me insight into the shittiness of those people. It's just
Okay.
so,
Well,
it's just so, it's so demoralizing and depressing. Remember the blowback Ezra Klein got when he said months and months ago, enough, 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 enough. People were so angry at him, but it's clear, and now it's so late. I mean, like if he doesn't step aside tomorrow, I mean, I don't understand. He saw what happened with Ruth Bader Ginsburg. He saw that she has no legacy. Her legacy is as a narcissistic, self-absorbed, miserable piece of shit whose entire legacy is the end of Roe v. Wade. I don't care what she did before. Her insistence on clinging to power is directly caused the end of Roe v. Wade. Congratulations, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. You made yourself not only irrelevant, but loathsome. He saw that and he's not going to step aside, even though that means that Donald Trump is going to be president again and then will be president for a third term because the Supreme Court will 100% give it to him and say, oh, we're talking about consecutive terms. And then he'll probably drop dead and one of his miserable, blithering idiot children will be president. I don't get it.
well, let me play devil's advocate for just a moment. I think he would say, first of all, I'm not entitled to anything. I ran, I won, I've done a good job. I ran again, I won all the primaries. And if somebody wanted to, they could have ran against me. And yes, Dean Phillips ran against him. Okay. But the truth is that would have been and is going to be an enormous disruption and an enormous risk to have him step aside and have somebody, presumably Kamala Harris, become the nominee. And that there's no way to say that that's the easy road. And I think, a few months ago, when that was proposed by people like Ezra Klein, and, people have been talking about it for quite a while, but that seemed like an extraordinary risk to take. And if you were convinced that Biden is basically fine, you would say, why would you bother to do this when it's such an incredible risk? Now, today, what we have is
But they weren't convinced he was fine, Paul. They knew. All those cretins in the White House knew.
They may have just convinced themselves that, we're just going to coast here and it'll be okay. And it's, we're not sure, but we think it's going to be okay. But that raises another issue that I want to talk about in a second. But uh, now we're faced with a situation where both paths are extremely risky. Like there's no safe path. That either he steps aside, Kamala Harris becomes a nominee. That's a huge risk. We don't know how that's going to play out. I just wrote a piece for MSNBC that made the case for why she may be stronger electorally just at this moment, that the timing is actually right for her. But maybe I'm wrong. It's a risk. And we know how much of a risk it is for him to continue.
But also, don't you think there's a certain excitement to it?
Yes.
Like, it's certainly going to be, the Democratic Party is going to be in the news. The convention is going to be in the news. It's not going to be Trump, 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 Trump. We are going to push him off the front page because we are going to be in this moment of intense exhilaration and intense excitement and intense anxiety. And that is news that the papers, the websites, everybody is going to, even Fox News is going to cover it, right? So I feel like that is an opportunity. I mean, look, it's either we slouch towards fascism and just like cling to this doddering old. Can you imagine? He's the same age as mom. Can you imagine mom being president? Mom would never even allow herself to do this because she is aware
Honestly,
of her
our
own
mother is
limitations.
much more
But
articulate
anyway,
than he
either
is
we
at the moment.
slouch, and she could fucking do a debate for sure. I believe, like, if she had to, she could do a debate.
Which raises the question I wanted to bring up, which is that, I think that as a lot of people, especially probably around him, looked at this, they were sort of frozen in the moment and maybe not thinking about the trajectory that he is on. And it causes two problems. There's an immediate problem and a long-term problem. The immediate problem is, okay, let's say he kind of gets past this debate and he does a couple good public appearances and maybe the polls kind of restabilize and everything looks like, okay, we've gotten past this problem. I don't know that how many people are think that in the next 4 months, he's never going to have another appearance where something similar happens, whether it's in the second debate that they're supposed to have in September or in some other context. Is he not going to do that? And when he does, the press is going to just explode with pieces about how he's too old. And by then he may be the nominee and it may be too late. So that's one thing, is the immediate term. I can't have any reassurance that he is not going to have another kind of incident like he did in the first debate. Second of all, I don't think at this point that anybody can honestly say that given where he is now, the trajectory that he has been on for the last 4 years, the difference between the person that he is cognitively now and the person that he was 4 years ago, that 4 years from now, as he approaches his 86th birthday, on this trajectory, that he's going to be able to do the job of president. I think he can do the job of president right now.
Of
But
course
the
he
idea
can't.
that he'll be able to do
Of
it in 4
course he
years
won't be
after
able
all
to.
it's the
Right.
toughest job in
I
the
mean,
world, right? There's just no way.
Now they say he can do it. They're saying he can do it between the hours of 10 and 4. That's like the best case that they're saying, these idiots. Oh, don't worry, he can do it between the hours of 10 and 4 because that's what the president said. That's like a part-time job. It's a part-time job. By then, he won't even be able to do it between 10 and 10:15.
I think a lot of Democrats think that, okay, well, if he ends up being the nominee, we'll still support him. And if it means that 6 months from now, he has to retire and Kamala Harris is the president, okay, that's fine. What's more important than anything else, is that Donald Trump is not the president.
I agree with that. And that's why I want him out, because he is not going to win. How much evidence is there that he is not going to win? I mean, part of me thinks this country deserves this country does not deserve democracy.
I do not associate myself with Ayelet's remarks.
You get the president you deserve. But on the other hand, half of us do deserve democracy. And unless we're going to secede from this nightmare that Trump will impose
But also,
on
the other
us,
thing is that you and I, unless we are sent to the special prison for people who spoke up too much, we're not going to bear the brunt of that. We're not going to be deported.
No, all those people voting, I am going to be so much better off from a tax perspective. It's like, you know what? Give it to me, you idiots, you white rural. It was so funny. I was listening to some podcast and they're like, oh, the snobbery white rural rage. I'm like, fuck you. A, read the book. And second of all, I promise you, you are 100 times more of a snob than anybody else when you are standing listening to someone in, I don't know, upstate New York talk about why they're going to vote for Donald Trump. But that's aside. That's me defending you
Thank you.
against the coastal elites who like to pretend they're not coastal elites. But I just, I don't know. I just feel like the stakes are so high. We have already lost so much. We lost Roe v. Wade. It is never, ever coming back. We lost, I mean, there are going to be women dead in the streets because of the inability to access medical care. I mean, how much else do we have to lose? There's not, Oberfell gone. It's going to be overruled. I mean, it's probably going to be overruled anyway. It's already too late. But how much more do we have to lose? And how much does this man want to be responsible for?
Those are some difficult questions. But there are some practical considerations at the moment. So what's happening right now is that the position that he's taking is, I'm running, I'm in it to win it. And the truth is that even if he was thinking about exiting, that's what he would be saying. He's going to say that he's running until he isn't, right? So that's what he told
Right.
a group of Democratic governors on a recent phone call. There have been, a few articles here and there that say that he's contemplating it, or he's mulling the question, or he told some ally, quote unquote, of his that he's, going back and forth and trying to decide. And the White House denies that that's in fact the case, which again is exactly what they would say no matter what. So it's not easy to figure out exactly what their thinking is. But as we record this, it's Thursday. And Friday, he's supposed to have an interview with George Stephanopoulos of ABC News. Now, we'll see how that goes. The trouble is that there's so much more scrutiny now on every single time he goes in public. They sent him out the day after the debate. He went to a rally in North Carolina and was fine, but he was reading off a teleprompter. And the thing is, that didn't fool anybody. Immediately, everyone said, okay, he's fine when he reads off a teleprompter, but what happens when he has to speak extemporaneously? And then you're getting more and more of these stories from people who said, I was at this fundraiser that he did in Hollywood with Clinton and Obama. And when he got up to speak, he was really not particularly coherent. And so more and more people are now talking to reporters. And I should say this too, a word about what's going on with the press. They are like a dog with a bone on this. This is the political reporters I'm talking about. They feel like they were lied to, that they never really liked the Biden press operation. They feel like they got stonewalled on a whole bunch of things, and they haven't been treated respectfully. And reporters tend to be petty and vindictive. They would never admit this to themselves, but a lot of this kind of explosion of coverage that's happening around this right now is them sort of saying, I'm going to show you. You were mistreating us all this
But
time.
don't you think they were lied to?
Yeah, I think so.
But do they have a point?
They do have a point. But I'm just saying, like, what the cycle is going to be, that they are not going to let this go, and they are now on guard for any kind of verbal slip up. And yeah, it's in some sense not fair that Trump can go out and, do some like 20-minute riff on whether he'd rather be eaten by a shark or electrocuted by a sinking electric boat. And it doesn't there's not a front page story about that. But, that's the situation right now. And any slip that he makes is going to be front page news. And if he has an appearance that's really bad, if this interview goes bad, or if something that happens in a week or in 2 weeks or whatever, then they're going to be all over it. And it's going to be a huge story. And then you get into this question of, like, what is the timing? Now, the Democratic convention is not until August. But, with each passing day, it becomes more and more difficult to make some kind of switch if that's what they want.
I heard the greatest, I don't even remember where I read this. It was some rando. I heard the greatest, like, it's never going to happen, but this would be the play that I think is so delightful, but again, never going to happen. Sotomayor retires. She's not well. Pressure, thumb screws, boot her off, get her to retire. Kamala Harris, nominated for the Supreme Court, shoved through. We know you can shove them through in 3 days. Look at Amy Coney Bryant. We can jam that through so that she's confirmed to the Supreme Court in a day and a half. The most symbolic of hearings. Fuck them. The Republicans set the stage for this. We take advantage. We jam Kamala onto the Supreme Court. Yay, you're a Supreme Court justice. Rest of your life. Woohoo. And then Gretchen Whitmer taken on as vice president. Then we use the 25th Amendment pursuant, just like my friend Jeannie Suk says in the New Yorker, Biden's gone. Gretchen is president. And then my Philip on this, because they were talking about whatever, I think Andy Bashir. I think it's all about Andy Bashir. This guy can get elected in Kentucky. Yes, his father, whatever. This guy is a Democrat elected and reelected in red state. Then we have Gretchen Whitmer, Andy Bashir, and we wipe the floor with that orange turd.
Do you want me to offer you some practical caveats that make it difficult, or is this just fantasy football?
Okay, sure.
Well,
what?
First of all,
What?
Democrats have 51 votes in the Senate. In order to jam Kamala Harris through, or anybody, you'd need the cooperation of all but one of them, including Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema. That's one thing. But maybe you could do it. Possible. But if the vice president steps down for any reason or becomes president, a new vice president has to be confirmed by both the Senate and the House, which is currently controlled by Republicans. So they would not confirm anybody.
Well, that's
because
a problem.
the next person in
So
line
what happens
is,
if there's no vice president?
Well, the next person in line is Speaker of the House Mike Johnson. They would I'm sure that they would just refuse to confirm any vice president for as long as the president is the president. It would just be vacant, and then Mike Johnson would become president if something were to happen to whoever the president is.
So realistically, what happens if he says he's not going to run is?
Well, he can do two things. He can say, I'm not going to run and I'm stepping down, and Vice President Harris is now the president, which he could do.
That's not going to happen.
Or he could say something that I think is pretty reasonable, which is that being president is a very difficult job, and running for president is a very difficult job. And I have decided that at my age, I can only do one of them. So I'm going to be president until January, and I'm going to step aside and put my support behind my vice president to be the Democratic Party nominee. That's the most likely way to do it.
Now, if that does happen, is it a gimme that it's Kamala, or do we have like a free-for-all? Which, to be honest, I know people are like, oh, it's a clusterfuck. I actually think a free-for-all is great. I think the more noise, the better, the more exciting, the better. The race for delegates, I think, is exciting. So I'm not I'm not in favor of a coronation necessarily. I like the idea of a race in there, but is that the most likely scenario? And if he can be convinced to step aside, is it inevitable that Kamala is the candidate?
Yes, it is. And here's why. First of all, there are some practical reasons why. Because if she is the nominee, she is already on the ticket. All the sort of campaign organizations are Biden-Harris. And that means that she can just take control of all the whatever $100 million that they have in the bank. And none of that is a problem. It's all very smooth and easy if she becomes a nominee. If not, then you could still sort of do some workarounds, but it's a big hassle. That's one sort of practical consideration. But more importantly, I don't think that any of the people who would potentially be opponents to her, Gavin Newsom, Gretchen Whitmer, Josh Shapiro, whoever you want to think of, I think that all of them are going to look at this and say, you know what? All the chips are sort of in her favor at this point. I'm not going to challenge her. This whole election is kind of a clusterfuck. Anyway, I'm going to run in 2028 like I always thought I was going to, and I'm just going to let this go. I think that they're all going to decide that it is too risky for them to try to challenge her when they'll probably lose anyway. And a lot of people feel that it would be a terrible insult to Black women who are the beating heart of the Democratic coalition to shove aside the first Black woman vice president.
I totally get that. Okay, but here's the thing. Those people, why do they think there's going to be an election in 2028? I mean, if you had asked them, is it possible that in the United States of America, a president would have immunity in which he could literally incarcerate or kill his opponent and be immune, just like the King of England, from whom we declared independence? You would have said that is absolutely impossible, that there's no Supreme Court ever in the land, no matter how conservative, who will give a president that kind of authority. So that happened. So why do they think there is going to be an election in 2028 that is anything like a real election? It's going to be like Putin's election. We're done. Trump is president. We are effectively finished.
Maybe. But, I think people who are career politicians have a fundamental faith in the system and their own destiny to rise through that system.
Yeah, that's why Roe v. Wade was overturned, because when we had both houses and we had the presidency, we did not pass a law that protected the right to abortion in this country. The single most important, don't even get me started. I'm so angry. I mean, this question just has just to keep it occurring to me. You know, we are slouching towards autocracy. I mean, let's be real. We know Trump's going to be elected. We're done. And things are only going to get worse. I don't think Jews are going to be the target. We're not going to be put into like concentration camps. I think people like you and me who have been very vocal anti-Trump. I mean, we're not even the most, but like, let's say you've written a million words about you're in more danger, far more than I am. But so maybe they'll take your assets. That's what they're going to do. They're going to take your money. I don't think we're going to be put in camps, but some people will be. There are lots of people. And then the question is, I never thought I would be the kind of person who would just have my head in the sand in my nice house, riding my electric bicycle and eating lobster rolls and being happy while the country turns into a fascist state. And I don't think I'm being hyperbolic. I really don't. And yet, like, I'm not packing my bags. My house is not on the market. Why am I not packing my bags? Why is my house not in the market? Why am I behaving like a Jew in Berlin in 1936? I never thought I thought I was going to be the person who was first on the boat out of there. And it turns out that we're all just sitting here like, oh, it's so terrible, and not getting out while the getting is good. Well, this has been cheerful. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Ayelet.
Bye.
Boundary Issues is produced and edited by Paul Waldman. Our music is by Zeke Shaban. If you'd like to get in touch, you can email us at waldmanpodcast@gmail.com. And this is a listener-supported podcast. So if you'd like to support us, you can go to patreon.com/boundaryissues. See you next time.